Hello, I'm Sophie. Welcome or welcome back. I'm back. I'm giving you some updates.
Biblio Sophie.
First of all, I apologize in advance for what is surely going to be a constantly changing light situation because it's afternoon, the sun is getting lower and lower, and yeah, things are just going to be constantly shifting. So, this video is going to be in two parts, some life update stuff and books I've been reading because I've been away for about a month. If you're just interested in the books, there'll be a timestamp in the notes and you can just go to that. Life update is a doozy of a life update. Let's not be coy about it. I have cancer. I found this out a couple of weeks ago. I have non-Hodgkin lymphoma. I have a very large mass in my ribcage, and I have started treatment for it. I finished my first round of chemotherapy last week, and I've been just kind of recovering from that at home. It is treatable. I'm generally optimistic. The prognosis is not impeccably perfect, but it is treatable, and I think I'm going to survive it. And I think it's going to be a very difficult, however many months, but my plan is to do as much of what I can do in my normal life, and every few weeks do chemo for however many months it takes. Yeah, that's kind of all I have to say about that. I don't think I'll be answering any more kind of specific medical questions, so please hold off on those. I made an announcement on Instagram last week, so some of you already know this. How does it change this channel? I do plan to keep making content, talk about books. I have been reading, I plan to keep reading. I can still sing and I can still write. In many ways, this isn't affecting me. Of course, there will be some days and some weeks probably where I will be very weakened by probably chemo or post-chemo, but we'll see. I just sort of have to take it as I go. So I suspect my videos will be less regular, but I plan to keep making them when I feel up to it. Is this going to turn into a cancer content page? No. I will be talking probably about my cancer because this has always been a channel about me and my relationship to books, and I have never been just like a book list channel or a somehow objective reviewer or something. This has always been very much about my relationship to reading books, and my relationship to reading books is going to include health stuff now. That's definitely going to color what type of books I pick and what I get out of the books that I'm reading, I suspect. Will I be making vlogs? I'm not sure. I think probably. Yeah, TBD. We'll see. So in many ways, I think not too many things are going to change on this channel. You just probably won't hear from me quite as often, I suspect. Speaking of which, you haven't heard from me in the past month because I said I was going on a hiatus. Did I announce my hiatus because I knew about my cancer? No, not at all. Quite the opposite. I was planning to be very, very busy this autumn with singing and writing my dissertation and then a bunch of gigs. I have canceled my October, November gigs. I just haven't been able to do them, really kind of for logistical reasons, getting to rehearsals. I was in hospital for a while. So the reason why I stepped away from YouTube was not at all the reason why I ended up being away from YouTube for a while. So that was sort of a twist of fate. And yeah, I think that's all I have about that for now. Overall, I'm optimistic. I'm looking down the road at something that's going to be very long and very difficult, but I think I'm well equipped to deal with it. So what have I been reading for the past month? I read Dune. I had said that I was planning to read it this autumn, and I did. And I really liked it. I had a great time. This was a delight. I had never seen, and still haven't seen, any of the movies. I haven't seen the David Lynch Dune, nor the more recent Villeneuve Dune, I guess. The only Dune knowledge I had was actually a fair amount from general pop culture currently, and also I had seen the documentary Jodorowsky's Dune, which I highly recommend. It is such a weird narrative of attempting to make a movie happen and definitely failing to do so. I don't talk about sci-fi very often on this channel, but I actually kind of do like sci-fi. I have read little of it. I do not like fantasy, but I do like sci-fi, and I wondered if this was going to be more fantasy-ish sci-fi, but this worked for me. I recommend it. If you like epics, it's fun. Also, it's not difficult to follow at all, I think. I mean, maybe it's just you either get into it or you don't, but I know that even just the first page, people are sometimes completely put off. But I don't know. I just found it very easy to follow who was who, what was what. It's well organized. It's an interesting story. It doesn't get too boring, even though it's quite long. Something that I actually quite like, not just had a fun time with, but really, really like about the book, is the constant intrusion of quotations from the future, essentially. The way that this book deals with the narrativizing of history, the construction of history from a future vantage point. So at the beginning of each section, there is always a citation from a future kind of biography, history of what has happened after this book. And it's a very interesting way to look at how storytelling interacts with propaganda, and this story is also so very self-consciously about the creation of a hero, the creation of a messiah. I think that's a really interesting element of the story that I liked seeing interwoven both in the writing of it and in the storytelling of it. Yeah, that's all I'll say about Dune. If you haven't read it and you've been wondering, I give it a thumbs up. I had a great time. Also, Duncan Idaho is the best character name. Yeah. As promised, I also read The Pumpkin Eater by Penelope Mortimer. Some people really love this book and really wanted to know what I thought about it. I liked it fine. I never really got into it. I read it kind of in two quick chunks. It's deeply readable. It flows nicely. It's sometimes very darkly funny, sometimes quite depressing. This follows a mid-century kind of upper middle class housewife who has an unnamed number of children, but quite a lot of them. And she's feeling disconnected from her life. It's sort of the plight of the woman who has kind of no structures in her life beyond her family. Her latest husband, of also several husbands, is not impeccably faithful. She has definitely just some depression issues, etc. And it's centered around her telling her story with a lot of the device of her being in therapy. She's just not quite right. So it's an interesting look at kind of mid-century womanhood and family life and disaffection. But I was never in love with it completely. It was fine. I had a fine time reading it. I think I had a little bit of a difficult time getting into it, actually. The dark wryness of it put me off. The sort of, I was just not quite in the headspace for its particular brand of English bourgeois surrealism. But yeah, now I've read it. Sorry, it's a pretty lackluster review. It was fine. Would read again, but kind of sans plus. Moving on to 2 new releases that I'm also not going to give absolutely ecstatic reviews of, unfortunately, but that's fine. Chat, I finally read a Sally Rooney. This is my very first Sally Rooney. I had as yet never read one, and I read the new Intermezzo. My friend brought this to me while I was in hospital, and in fact, I read all of it while I was in hospital, while mostly in the late night waiting for the changeover from one chemotherapy infusion bag to the next. So that probably colored my experience of it somewhat. What did I think of it? I liked it. Fine. It is not my new favorite book. I understand why somebody likes Sally Rooney. I don't know how representative this is of her other books, of course, because it's the only one I've read. I do know that plot-wise, it is very representative of her other books. I have seen both the Normal People and Conversations with Friends adaptations and liked them, actually. So I know that Rooney is very much writing about relationships, about complicated relationships and the dynamics within various relationships, especially romantic relationships, but not exclusively, and how friendships, sexual relationships, filial relationships all kind of change the various power dynamics therein, how those interact with gender, age, class, etc. So this is definitely a continuation of that. I can't speak to the specifics of the writing style. I've heard that this is slightly a deviation in some ways. I think especially in the kind of disconnected, disjunct Peter sections. So I cannot judge that, but in terms of the concerns that Rooney is writing about, this seems very much of a piece with her other works. This is a kind of following 5 people in various permutations of interpersonal dynamics, 2 brothers, Ivan and Peter, and 3 women in their respective lives, a love triangle, a lot to do with age differences within relationships, gender dynamics, class and education, and kind of also even physical ability. So these are all interesting things to me. I found the book a little too long. It potentially actually was useful for it to be so long because I think it grew on me in its length, but The first 150 pages I was not really into. I didn't really like the characters, and looking ahead I was thinking, oh my god, I'm gonna have to deal with this for, 300 more pages. This is clocking it at almost 500 pages. So it seemed a little overwhelming at the beginning because I just wasn't super into it. Speaking of writing style, there are a couple of disjunct things that I think are interesting. I think it's a little overdone, and I'm not sure if it is just the Peter sections. When it is the Peter sections and there are a lot of really short sentences and also a lot of sentences lacking a subject, or in which the direct object comes before the verb, or word order is a little bit funny. I cannot remember if that was exclusive to one character's vantage point. I don't think it was, and those got to be too long. There were too many of those kind of spiky sentences sometimes. Those should be spices. They got to be kind of this redundant scheme of bum 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 bum. There's this, the overall rhythm felt wrong sometimes, and that could be by design. I know that in some ways it was by design, but I don't necessarily agree with that design sometimes. So yeah, this is like a solid, pass for me. It was fine. I'm glad I finally read a Rooney book. I would like to read another at some point. I have Conversations with Friends, so I was planning to read that at some point anyway, and I probably still will. Yeah, I feel like I joined the hype. Yeah. And then Our Evenings by Alan Hollinghurst. This just came out also beginning of what's it called? We are in October. October is the month that we are in. I had an arc of it, and actually that's what I read from, but they also sent me a finished copy. This was also too long. This was definitely too long. This also is about 500 pages, and a bunch of chunks of it could be excised, and you kind of wouldn't really lose anything. That said, I had a good time reading this. It was too slow, too long, kind of boring. It sort of felt like any number of like 20 to even 50 page chunks could have been excised without really compromising anything. And yet, I didn't really mind that. Now again, let's do some personal context. I have been reading this week while dealing with a lot of physical pain and therefore insomnia. So I've been reading this also kind of in the middle of the night while kind of blurry and in pain. And honestly, it's beautifully written. The atmosphere is really lovely and interesting and kind of encompassing. And so I didn't mind the fact that it was just sort of slow and I could check out a little bit. If I kind of missed a page or two, didn't really super remember what was going on, it didn't matter. There are some cricket games and I'm completely befuddled by cricket, for instance. So, what is this about? I didn't say. This follows Dave Wynn, basically from teenage dumb through to older middle age. He, from the 60s to the present, basically. He is a young English boy whose father he never knew and was from Burma. His mother is a white English woman, so he has to deal with a lifetime of kind of outsiderness. He attends an elite school on kind of a scholarship, and that kind of sets him up for life, and it sets him up always to be kind of partially in and partially out of the upper class, and kind of looking in and kind of trained within it, but also always by virtue of both his own class background and his racial background, kind of always a little bit an outsider of it. He becomes an actor, and so we follow his life. We follow his relationship to various people around him, coming of age, sexuality. Spoiler alert, he's gay, but he's not the only gay one. And I won't say any more about that. So this was long and pleasant. It felt like I was just kind of floating down a river. I am only a little bit taken aback by the very, very end. There is, and I won't say anything specific, there's a framing device at the very end that I'm not sure about. There's a very major shift in the last, couple handful of pages that I'm still trying to grapple with, actually. So, yeah. I was about to forget a book because I don't have a physical copy of it. I listened to The Vet's Daughter by Barbara Comyns also. This is quite short. The audiobook was nice. I liked the narrator a lot. This takes place mostly in Edwardian London. It is a story of a vet's daughter. Her father, the vet, is terrible, is an absolutely horrible man, and her mother is sick and bedridden, and poor Alice is just trying to live her life, and it's not great. This is a weird, pretty bleak book in many, many ways. She has various adventures. It's very much about kind of the plight of the Edwardian girl and woman, the lack of control that she has in her life, over her life, and how much control the men in her life have over her. It gets into some, weird and spooky territory later on, which I won't spoil, but it's a good October read if you're into kind of spooky season type things. This is annoying me. So yeah, that was a fast, really interesting, riveting read that ultimately left me feeling kind of bad, honestly. Not because it's bad, but it was, oof. We're gonna wait for this to pass. And then there are a handful of books that I am sort of in process of reading, that I'm dipping in and out of. Sort of the foremost of those is Fernando Pessoa's book of Disquiet, which I am both reading in French, and actually I started listening to it while I was in hospital in English. There's an audiobook of it, and so I would kind of listen to parts of it, usually in the early morning after my vitals were taken and kind of napping before doctor's appointments, which actually served me really, really well. This is in really short, sometimes really, really short snippets, vignettes, and it was nice to just kind of dip in and out of just a few minutes at a time, basically, in the audiobook. And it's been nice to, now that I'm home and I have my physical copy, dip in and out of just reading one or two vignettes sometimes at a time. I'm about halfway through. I'm really enjoying it. I mean, it's very much, for me, this is like a pseudo autobiography. It's a biography of a fact list biography. It's from the viewpoint of several different personae that Pessoa has, and it all revolves around the nature of being, of writing a lot, of trying to convey the world, capture the world, a lot of semiotics and kind of philosophy, some dealings with some theology, just this nexus of being an author, being a person in the world, a lot of the stuff that I like. I'll talk about it more in the future when I've finished it. I would like to organize my thoughts about it a little bit more so that I can give you a little bit more concretely stuff than just it's about being, but also it's a little bit vague. It is sometimes insufferable, by the way. Especially one of the personae of the book, because it's all in first person. It's in like a sort of an autobiography. I don't know if I said that, but one of them is sometimes utterly insufferable, by the way. But still, it's been good. It's been good for me. Yeah, I'm unsurprised. I knew I would like this. I've been meaning to read it for a really long time, and yeah, it's been good to me. I've barely been reading through some of the essays of Lydia Davis in Essays 2, but have been enjoying those. I've been reading some translation essays, essays about translation and about Proust. That's in the first section, which actually I had read previously before, but it's good. I mean, it's, again, the type of stuff that I really like. Will I finish this before the end of the year? Probably not, but I'm definitely enjoying dipping in and out of it. I read exactly only one, the very first story of, what is this called again? The World Goes On. I can never remember this title, by Krasznahorkai, László Krasznahorkai. It is intense. You have to get into the style. I am into the style. We'll see how many of these I read. The first story is a couple, maybe 4 or 5 pages long, maybe not even. Yeah, it's about 5 pages long. It is 1 sentence. So that gives you some taste of why this can be overwhelming. But I'm definitely going to read more of these. They're all, I think, really very short, but they're all pretty intense, both in terms of content and construction. So it might be doled out littly at a time. So yeah, I feel rusty about talking about books to camera, but then again, does it ever get easy? I don't know. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you when I see you next. Bisous, bisous.